And that's all we had for you on KTN Newsline tonight. We thank you very much for following our bulletin. Keep it here for more. There's a feature coming up. Keep it here for that as well. On behalf of everybody who's participated in this bulletin, including our sign language interpreter, Resha Awiti, have a good evening.
Deaf community raised me practically.
Most children learn their first words from their parents and guardians.
For me, I first signed until my grandmother came home because my mom was a teacher and she was widowed when I was only 2 years old.
As a child, it can be confusing when you realize that your normal is not everyone's normal.
For me, I think I came to the realization that my mom is deaf when I was exposed to school.
This is the story of most children who grew up with deaf parents, and they're known as CODA.
So the doctor now is saying, here are the results and your son is deaf. Me, I had he's dead. So I cried. I cried.
Pamela Yvonne grew up with both deaf parents. While other babies learned how to say mama and baba, she was signing. Sign language is the first language she knew, and she realized her childhood was different from others after she started going to school.
For me, I think I came to the realization that my mom is deaf when I was exposed to school. So when I started going to school, you'd find that it was weird for maybe my teachers, and they kept asking me about it. They'd ask me questions like, how are you communicating at home? Like, how is it that you talk to your mom? Are you signing? Like, they'd ask me so many questions, and they kept interrogating me about it, that I was like, Kwani, it's not normal. Because, you know, that was how I was raised. That's my household. Me, I don't know how your household is looking like.
We sing in sign language, and I'm happy about it.
Similar for Amina Nkadziri Eid, the Kenyan chairperson of CODA, Children of Deaf Adults. Born of a deaf mother at the age of 2, her maternal grandmother took her when she realized that she was signing instead of talking.
My mom was a teacher and she was widowed when I was only 2 years old. So practically my dad was not there. And she was a teacher in a deaf school, so everyone around me was deaf. The best thing I could do was use sign language until one time when my grandma came after my mom was mourning that period. It's when she realized I'm signing more than I could talk, and she took me away from mom.
One of the challenges is that they had to learn to be adults very early in life.
I had to become self-reliant very, very early because you find communication barriers. So sometimes I'd find myself going to the bank at a very early age, like traveling by myself at a very early age. I learned to be very self-reliant.
Many other times I will stand up for my mom, and many other times they also forget, like, we are kids, because they'll tell you go and do something. This is something you've never experienced, you don't know, but you have to stand out and do it. For me, I knew how to cook at a very young age. I could do chores at a very young age because I didn't have an option. Yes, so I really became very independent. At 12, I think I could travel alone from Mombasa to Nairobi.
Throughout their childhood, people kept asking uncomfortable questions to the point where they had to defend their mothers in public.
Sometimes they'd ask you so many questions and you'd find it nagging. You're always asking me about it. Everybody's always asking me about it. Like, come on, how many times will you answer the same question? So maybe that is something I felt when I was younger. I was like, just stop asking already. It is the way it is. There's nothing we can do about it. And I was shocked. What do you mean you've never met a deaf person?
To me, it was painful, hurting, sometimes annoying. Because we will go to the market and she would ask, she can talk, as I told you. She has some speech, so she could ask for something, but she can't hear back. So she would look at me and I'll try to interpret what the people are saying. And people will talk back and like, this lady is pretending. It was really hurting. I will go defend mom and say she can't hear.
Unlike other children, Pamela had delayed speech because her first language was sign language.
According to my mom, she says I did have a bit of delayed speech because my first language was sign language. The way I'd communicate with her was through sign language. And then because I had hearing siblings, it came a time, of course, I learned how to speak from them, from the neighbors, from the people who would visit us at home, just from a general interaction. But I picked up sign language first and then spoken language next.
The experiences affected her childhood, especially with presumptions that deaf people cannot think on their own.
The fact that they think, you're dumb, you can't reason, you're nothing, as in you're just an object, it's really painful. My mom is an educated person. I've met many educated deaf people, but when a person meets a deaf person, I am maybe interpreting or I'm with them, they assume I reason for them, I should answer for them, but deaf people can reason, they have feelings, they know what they want.
Pamela's mother, Aska Josephine, founder and director of the Federation of Deaf Women Empowerment Network, became deaf when she was 6 years after suffering from mumps. She went from being an active child to a child who had to rely on lip reading.
By the time I became deaf, I didn't know how to lip read, and I was hearing. So when my parents could talk, I was expecting to hear, but now I couldn't hear. But I really cried, and my father and mother were also crying because I was a very active child and even a very bright child in school. So I was taken to a school for the deaf in Siaya County, in Nyangoma Primary School for the deaf. This is where I got to learn how to lip read. I learned how to write. So when I went back home, I could at least write to my parents or lip read.
Growing as a deaf had its fair share of challenges, from almost being raped to not having romantic suitors.
There was a party nearby, so my siblings actually fled from home, and one of the neighbors actually, when they realized I was left alone, came back. So this is the one who tried to rape me at night. I couldn't see clearly, but when he touched me, I recognized who the person was. And I tried to shout, and my father heard my voice crying, and he came and he fled away.
They decided to settle it because the man denied the charges and he threatened to hurt her. She did not have suitors. She only focused on her chores and school.
I didn't even go dancing. I didn't go having strike, doing anything, giving stories. I would carry water, just go home, fetch to the river and back as a quiet person because I couldn't interact with my peers. Picking firewood, I would just do like any other person. The only difference, I couldn't stop and give stories, so I would just look on and just move on. When they stand giving stories, I will still stand and we move on, collect firewood and go back home. Even going to the posho mill, we'll just go together with my friends. They would talk about things, but I'll just carry what I'm supposed to do. I did all that, but I didn't enjoy my youth on the part of dating because of the disability limit I had.
Aska started her foundation to help deaf women and girls who have faced discrimination.
Most of the time we are abused and we keep quiet, and we need a platform where deaf women and girls' issues can be heard to empower them and even empower the deaf young girls not to go through the same thing that I faced when I grew up as a young deaf girl. And also to help those who maybe are survivors of maybe gender-based violence.
They would like to own a safe house for the victims. At the moment, she hosts some of the girls and women in her house. On how she was able to communicate with her children, Aska had her firstborn son when she was 20 years old. Her sisters helped with raising her first two children, but she raised her lastborn Pamela on her own with the help of a deaf nanny.
Only my lastborn who started signing first, because at that time I was not living with other relatives, I was living alone. I felt I could take care of a child, so I employed a deaf house girl. You can imagine a house full of deaf people. Yes. So we were all signing. So the boys were playing outside. So the house girl and I and my husband was at times living away, because at that time I was working in a different county. I was in Nyeri and my husband was in Nairobi. So the lastborn, I employed a deaf house girl, and that is what affected my daughter's speech. She started speaking well when I took her to school in baby class at the age of 2.5 years. Yes. This is when my daughter started to speak, but before she'll say one word or two, but will sign more.
So never playing, so.
The situation is opposite for Teresia Simba. She is a mother of a deaf child. She realized her son Fadhili, who is 8 years old now, could be deaf when he was 6 months.
I told my husband, I told him, hey, I think this boy, I think this baby can't, there's just something. Then of course he started doing his own, investigation. It stretched, I think, at 1 year, 1.5 years, he would come in the house. The way from the gate, when you open the gate, you can hear the sound. So the others would run, he would stay until probably, maybe he's watching TV, then he would notice there's someone behind, then he'll be like, oh, you're home.
After several tests, their fear was confirmed. Their son was deaf.
I cried. I called one of my friends who was my leader, because of course we had walked the journey with her. And I just went to the washroom and I called her and I'm crying. I'm telling her, hey, the doctor, whatever fears that we had, it has been confirmed that he's deaf. So I'm crying. Then she just gave me a word. She encouraged me. I think she prayed for me. I can't even remember, but she just encouraged me. But I just left feeling like, there's just hope. But it was just darkness. It was just a darkness and like, hey, are there deaf children? That was like, I think people are deaf when they are. So for me, it was just as a moment of just every feeling together, a shock, and thinking, hey, okay, did I do something wrong? So there were those moments in the bathroom.
Terry was still in denial. She believed that her child would hear. She fasted and prayed. She eventually accepted after having a heart-to-heart talk with her elder sister. They looked for a support group and eventually had Fadhili admitted in a deaf school. However, at first, they were not accepted in one school.
That time he was hyper, like he was doing things. In fact, before we really understood him, he was doing things that, even for us, he would bite, he would just throw tantrums because no one is understanding him. So when we went to that school, I think that teacher looked at Fadhili and then he just told me, just very bluntly, we can't have him here. No, we can't have him here. She just said no. And I thought, what? Because I was told, but the assessment had told me, if we'll give you a letter and go wherever you want. So I was like, I'm going to do justice. Those people, bring them a letter. Then I just thought, you know what? Even for me at home, we are also learning him. So why am I expecting someone else to be able to take care of my son?
I think also fathers need to play a little role in, especially in helping their family, especially the wife, because women are not as strong as men. So at times when they discover that their children cannot hear, they'll need a lot of support before they accept that. And also, I think we need to act quickly for us to get the most out of what is available to help this kid.
Fadhili loves football. And his favorite footballer is Cristiano Ronaldo. Apart from playing football, he plays drums. However, due to financial constraints, they're not able to get him drums at the moment. Audiologist Dan Patrick Waga says there are two categories, deaf and hard of hearing, depending on the degree of hearing loss. It can also be genetic or acquired.
Yeah, we do several tests depending on the age. As an audiologist, I would say for those, we have neonatal tests, which is done right from the hospitals immediately a child is born. They are called the neonatals. Then we have the ABR, auditory brainstem response, which is up to about 3 years. Then we have tympanic tests. Then we have the Purton audiometric tests. But Purton start from age 3.5 and above because of the response. There are those logistics. So these tests are the ones that will determine the degree of hearing loss, or whether after screening to identify. Neonatals is just to screen to confirm whether this child who is born is deaf or.
From the tests, they will start immediate interventions and parents counseled on how to manage. Apart from the genetic reasons, other causes can be contributed during the pregnancy.
During the time, from the time of conception when the mother conceives, just like these other causes of disabilities, they are just general, isn't it? Until the way he handles those pressure, this so many other conditions, isn't it? Impact, when the child is still in the womb, isn't it? But it goes on, and also the diseases the mother can get during that process. I don't want to give details of those such diseases as this and that. That one can also cause, just like any other disability. Then, during birth, that process of birth, the prolonged birth, the use of forceps, can go and disturb. The head has got different parts and it is still soft. You get it?
What are the prevention measures?
For those who are genetically, you cannot prevent. Am I right? But what is important is the intervention measures, which can be preventive and immediate for those who have. Then this exposure, like for a mother coming from a clinic, you avoid those noisy matatus or what? Because that is the prevention. Otherwise, your child will start doing many use of headphones, exposure to loudness. Many people today, I don't want to say students or learners, or exposure to these factories or of course is causing them hearing impairments. Then we have these diseases like otitis media. Those ones can be addressed through medical and the proper use. You avoid infection, flies, and also management and disposal of those who are infected.
Nixon Kakiri, the national chairperson of the Kenya National Association of the Deaf, says that after decades of advocating for the right of deaf people and recognition of the Kenyan Sign Language in the year 2010, Article 7.3d recognized Kenyan Sign Language as a language.
And Article 54 talks about accessibility of information through sign language. Article 120 of the Constitution recognizes sign language as an official business language in the Kenyan legislature. So right now, Kenyan Sign Language is the third official language in the Republic of Kenya. So the advocacy is still on to see to it that people learn about that and become aware of how sign language is being used. And as we talk right now, we are pushing for the Kenyan Sign Language Bill in the Parliament.
In schools, we are only taught of Swahili and English, so the first segment of the bill addresses incorporating that into our education system and making it compulsory to teach sign language like any other language. And the goal here is to at least achieve elimination of that barrier in terms of communication.
Including sign language in the curriculum would benefit about 2.7 million deaf Kenyans, a significant portion of the population. Omi says Section 2 of the bill talks about the general structure of the language.
You're dealing with 5% of the population. That's 2.7 million Kenyans out there who are deaf. Some who are deaf and blind. So that's not a small number that you can just say, why are we making it compulsory? It's a must. It's like half of Nairobi being deaf.
Provide a framework for the inclusion of the deaf, hard of hearing, and deaf-blind community in all aspects of the society. Regulate sign language interpretation in Kenya through registration sign language interpreters. Establish the Kenyan Sign Language Council.
So the second segment of the bill talks about creation of the Kenya Sign Language Council, which generally addresses issues regulation. Like any body today, the KMDPU is a body for medical doctors and practitioners, so that you eliminate the quacks and the untrained professionals in the space. We have the body for engineers, we have the body for nurses, same case. So the council itself will act like a body.
The council shall regulate the use of development of sign language in Kenya, put in place measures of the recognition and preservation of the use of sign language, undertake research and create awareness on the culture, heritage of the deaf community in Kenya, set and enforce standards for the training, practice and use of Kenyan Sign Language and Kenya Sign Language interpretation, register and license sign language interpreters in Kenya, maintain a register and keep a record of all sign language interpreters registered under this act, protect and promote the right of the deaf, hard of hearing and deaf-blind community to equal access to information and communication, including the right to access to justice. Determine the minimum fees chargeable for the provision of services under this act. Advise the Cabinet Secretary and county governments on matters relating to sign language. Develop and regulate ethical and disciplinary standards for the sign language interpreters. Collaborate with the other relevant government agencies in the use and development of sign language in Kenya, and perform such other functions as may be prescribed by any other law or as are necessary for the promotion of objects of this act.
Mimi naitwa Ali Mazo, mtangazaji mwenzangu kupitia ile lugha ya ishara ni Meresha Owiti.
So I am Ashley Mazuri, or sign language interpreter is Demian Evans.
Another factor that the deaf community would like considered is increasing the inset on television during bulletins.
Looking at the media, in the year 2017, all the media houses began incorporating or onboarding interpreters. That is why we have the sign language inset. But you see that box is still very, very minimal to cater for all of us. It needs to be 30% of the screen for the interpreter to be visible. You see, someone like me who uses spectacles have to strain, which is difficult for me. So it is imperative that the interpreter inset be maximized so that the deaf can access information clearly.
Digitally enabled learning. The government is in the process of connecting learning and training institutions to internet through the Kenya Digital Economy Acceleration Program.
Meresha Owiti, a sign language interpreter on KTN News, talks about the genesis of TV sign language interpretation.
Interpretation on TV and especially on news started with KTN. And I can proudly say here that it's me and my late colleague, William Silla, we are the pioneers of these things. All other media houses that you see doing news now, they followed us, and they didn't even follow us immediately. They took a year or so after we had started it. This was in 2013, the month of October. It was the same time we were celebrating the Deaf Awareness Week. So we had these things that was bothering us, that the deaf were really not getting anything in the news, and that brought about through their culture of, the deaf have that culture of meeting points. So what they would do, because there was no interpretation, there's no way they could get information, they have specific places they meet in town, and I think some of you have seen them. So they would gather there the next day to get what was in the news yesterday. So they'll just rely with whoever thought that understood what the news was all about. So we thought, how about interpreting the news? Then myself with my colleague William Silla, we decided to go physically and visit the media houses and explain to them what we do, what the community is all about. Our first stop was at a media house somewhere in town, and they were not very receptive. They thought that was going to be very cumbersome. Somebody, an anchor reads the news, then you are beside there signing. It was going to be cumbersome, and it was going to be waste of time. So we were sent away, in short. So we came to Mombasa Road, and we were very shocked. The reception was very different. We were welcomed at the gate. Even after explaining the nonsense that we had, we were welcome. That day, it didn't take long, that very day, that Saturday, my colleague went on air with the first bulletin.
Meresha talks about the challenges of TV sign language interpretation.
It is so demanding. For one, outside there, we were used to seminars that when the speaker is just next to you, and you can only say, pardon me, what did you say? What's the spelling of that word? you correlate, and then when you're in a live interpretation, the deaf are there. You can see their reaction if they are not getting you, or they even help you when you're stuck. But this one, you are stuck alone with the camera, the two of you. You get the message, you don't get it, it's up to you. The speed is super, I don't know, it is so fast. The speed they use in news bulletin is not the speed that normal speakers use out there. You will agree with me. So you have to keep up with that speed and be very, very accurate and attentive. It is quite challenging, very, yeah.
However, this is not just a Kenyan, but a global challenge. This is a report by the first European seminar on sign language interpretation on TV and media. The report stated that lack of formal and comprehensive training of sign language interpretation on TV and media is reported by the respondents to be one of the most pressing issues. The interpreters state that they mainly learn on the job and by being mentored by colleagues. Many respondents from various countries, e.g. Belgium, Germany, Italy, Lithuania, Netherlands, Poland, Switzerland and United Kingdom mentioned the increased need for deaf interpreters on TV. Deaf interpreters are seldom recruited and there is no training available for them to become proficient interpreters in the setting. The display of the interpreter on the screen is another challenge reported by the respondents. There is an enormous variety across countries, from an in-vision interpreter to an interpreter in a box embedded on one of the sides of the screen. Agutu Rosa, KTN News.